I expected grief after my father died. I didn't expect a power grab. When my stepmother decided to claim the house and erase me from it, she didn't realize my dad had already prepared for that exact moment. The first time my stepmother told me I didn't belong, she did it with funeral flowers still on the porch. My father's suit jacket was draped over the back of a chair in the living room like he might walk back in and put it on. The house smelled like coffee that had been reheated too many times and the faint sweetness of lilies dying in a vase. People had tracked mud in from the cemetery, and nobody had the energy to clean it. I was standing in the hallway, holding a cardboard box of sympathy cards and envelopes people had shoved into my hands as they left the reception. The box felt heavier than it should have, like it contained something sharp. My stepmother watched me from the kitchen doorway, eyes dry, arms folded so tightly her knuckles looked white. Then she said it, loud enough for my aunt in the living room to hear. "This is my house," she declared. "You just live here." I blinked, honestly thinking I'd misheard her. I'd been through one of the worst days of my life. My father had just been lowered into the ground. The last thing I expected was a property dispute, over a house I wasn't even trying to claim. "I'm not," I started. She cut me off with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're a guest," she said. "So act like it." I could feel the air change. The silence in the living room got louder. My aunt pretended to fuss with napkins. Someone coughed. Nobody met my eyes. That's the part people don't understand about grief. It doesn't just break your heart. It strips your defenses. And my stepmother knew exactly when I'd have the least strength to fight back. But I need to rewind, because this didn't start after the funeral. It started years ago, the moment my dad married a woman who believed love was ownership. My parents divorced when I was young enough that most of my memories of them together are blurred around the edges. I remember my dad's laugh more than his anger, his hands smelling like motor oil from working on his truck, his habit of squeezing my shoulder when he walked past me like that alone was a sentence, "I'm here." After the divorce, he tried. He really did. Weekends. Phone calls. Birthdays. He wasn't perfect, but he was there in a way a lot of dads weren't. Then he met Karen. Yes, her real name was Karen. Fate has a sense of humor. At first, she was polite. Too polite. The kind of polite that makes your skin tighten because you can feel the rules under it. She asked me what sports I played, what grades I got, what my plans were. Like she was interviewing me for a position I didn't apply for. I remember my dad's eyes that first dinner, hopeful and nervous. "Be nice," his expression begged without words. So I was nice. I told myself she made him happy, and that was what mattered. The first small warning came when I was 17. I'd come over for a weekend and left a hoodie on the back of a chair. When I came back the next week, it was gone. "Oh," Karen said lightly when I asked about it. "I donated it. It was cluttering the living room." I stared at her. "It was mine." She gave me a smile like I was being childish. "Then you should keep track of your things." My dad laughed awkwardly and patted my shoulder. "She's just trying to keep the house organized." I let it go. That became the pattern. A boundary crossed. Me reacting. My dad smoothing it over. Karen getting bolder. Over the years, she found ways to remind me that I was temporary. She'd refer to my room as the guest room, even though it still had my trophies on the shelf and my old posters rolled up in the closet. She'd accidentally schedule family events when she knew I couldn't come, then sigh and say, "Well, you're always so busy." When I did come, she made sure I felt watched. "What time are you leaving Sunday?" she'd ask on Saturday morning. Not, "Do you want to stay?" Just, "When do we get our house back?" My dad noticed sometimes. He'd look uncomfortable, like a man watching a slow leak he kept meaning to fix. He'd pull me aside and say, "Just ignore her. She doesn't mean it." But she did mean it. Karen was careful never to be cruel in a way that sounded cruel. She used implication, tone, the kind of passive control that leaves you feeling crazy for being upset. And my dad, God, my dad hated conflict. He'd been raised on the idea that keeping the peace was the same as keeping the family. So he kept the peace. Even when it cost me. When I was in my 20s, I moved out of state for work. Not because I was running away, but because that's how life went. We spoke less often. Holidays were split. Calls became shorter. And every time I did talk to him, Karen was somehow in the background. Tell him we're busy, I'd hear her say. He needs to call ahead next time, she'd murmur, as if I couldn't hear. My dad would laugh and cover the phone like it would hide her words from me. Then he got sick. It wasn't sudden. That was the cruel part. It was slow. At first, it was tiredness. Then appointments. Then that look in his eyes that said he was trying not to scare me while he was already scared himself. Karen took over. She became the gatekeeper of information, the manager of his schedule, the person who decided when I could talk to my own father. He's resting, she'd text. He can't handle stress, she'd write. You asking questions is making this worse. I drove down as often as I could, but every visit felt like I was trespassing. The last time I saw my dad alive, he looked smaller. Not just thinner. Smaller, like the world had started to erase him. He squeezed my hand and tried to smile. I'm sorry, he whispered. For what? I asked, throat tight. His eyes flicked toward the doorway where Karen stood with her arms folded. He didn't answer. He just squeezed my hand again, and his fingers felt cold. When he died, Karen called me after she'd already called everyone else. I know that because my phone lit up with messages before hers came through. I'm so sorry. Call me. He's gone. Then Karen's number. Her voice was calm, controlled. Your father passed, she said. The funeral is Friday. No emotion. No softness. Just logistics. I drove in that night. I barely slept. When I arrived at the house, she opened the door only halfway, like she didn't want me taking up space. I put some things in the guest room, she said. My room. The one that had been the guest room for years. I walked inside and felt the house hit me like a memory. The familiar creak in the hallway floorboard. The smell of Dad's aftershave lingering faintly near the bathroom. The framed photo of him holding me as a kid on the mantel, slightly turned, like someone had rotated it away from view. Karen watched me notice everything. You can stay until after the funeral, she said. But we'll need to talk about arrangements after that. Arrangements. I didn't understand what she meant until after we buried him. After the condolences. After the awkward hugs. After I helped carry food inside because my hands needed something to do other than shake. That's when she looked at me, with the house behind her like a throne, and said. This is my house. You just live here. And in that moment, I realized grief wasn't going to protect me. It was going to be used against me. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of keys. Not the soft jingle of someone setting them down. The deliberate click of locks being tested. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and listened as Karen moved through the house like she was conducting an inventory. Doors opened. Doors closed. The front door clicked twice. The back door once. When I stepped into the hallway, she was standing by the thermostat, adjusting it downward. We don't need it that warm, she said without looking at me. It's freezing, I replied. She finally turned. It's my house. There it was again. Not grief. Not loss. Ownership. I went into the kitchen to get coffee and noticed something missing immediately. The wooden mug rack Dad had built himself was gone from the counter. So was the framed photo of us fishing when I was 12. The one where he was squinting into the sun and I was holding a fish like it was a trophy. Where are Dad's things? I asked. Karen poured herself coffee slowly, carefully, like she was enjoying the tension. I put them away, she said. I don't think it's appropriate for you to be deciding what happens to them. I'm not deciding anything, I said. I just wanted. You want keepsakes, she snapped. Everyone wants something when someone dies. The accusation landed hard. I want my father, I said quietly. Her jaw tightened. Don't be dramatic. By noon, I realized she wasn't just posturing. She was systematically removing me. The spare key my dad had given me years ago no longer worked. My suitcase, which I'd left by the back door, had been moved into the garage. The guest bathroom had a new sign taped to the mirror, private. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. You don't live here, she said flatly. You're confusing grief with entitlement. That word again. Entitlement. I felt my hands clench. I'm here to help settle Dad's affairs, I said. That's it. She smiled thinly. His affairs are settled. They weren't. I knew that because my dad had called me 6 months before he died, voice low, like he didn't want to be overheard. I took care of things, he'd said. Legally. I'd asked him what he meant. You'll see, he replied. Just, don't let her rush you. At the time, I hadn't pushed. I wish I had. That afternoon, my cousin texted me. Cousin, just so you know, Karen is telling people you're trying to take the house. I stared at the message. That's not true, I typed back. Cousin, I figured. Just thought you should know. By dinner, the narrative had spread. I could feel it in the way people looked at me when they stopped by. Polite. Distant. Guarded. Karen, meanwhile, played the gracious widow perfectly. Oh, he's just overwhelmed, she'd say about me, hand on her chest. Grief does strange things. She'd say it loudly enough for me to hear. That night, she sat across from me at the table and slid a piece of paper toward me. I think it's best if you make other arrangements, she said. It was a printed list of nearby motels. You're kicking me out? I asked. I'm giving you options, she corrected. This isn't healthy for either of us. I stared at her. My dad died 3 days ago. Yes, she said coolly. And life goes on. Something inside me went very still. I'll stay until the will is read, I said. Her eyes flickered. Just for a second. There's no need for that, she replied quickly. Everything goes to me. We were married. I leaned back in my chair. Then you won't mind waiting, I said. She stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. How dare you, she hissed. After everything I did for your father. I'm not disputing anything, I said. I just want it done properly. Her voice dropped. You're not welcome here. I'll leave tonight, I said calmly. But I'll be at the will reading. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. I packed in silence. When I reached for Dad's watch from the nightstand, she snatched it away. That stays, she said. That was his, I replied. He wore it every day. And I was his wife, she shot back. You don't get to take pieces of him. I looked at her then, really looked at her. And I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit. She wasn't protecting his memory. She was erasing mine. I left that night and checked into a motel 10 minutes away. The room smelled like bleach and old carpet, but it was quiet. I called the attorney my dad had mentioned. Left a voicemail. I'm his son, I said. I think there may be issues. The call came back an hour later. Yes, the attorney said calmly. There are. And you should be present. The will reading was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Karen texted me once more that night. Karen, don't make this ugly. I didn't respond. Because it already was. The will reading took place in a conference room that smelled faintly of toner and lemon disinfectant. No dramatic courtroom. No oak-paneled walls. Just a rectangular table, a box of tissues in the middle, and a clock on the wall that ticked louder than it should have. Karen arrived 10 minutes early. She was dressed in black, of course, but not funeral black. Sharp black. Structured. The kind of outfit you wear when you expect to win something. She greeted the attorney with a practiced sadness, one hand pressed to her chest. "Thank you for seeing us," she said. "This has been overwhelming." The attorney nodded politely and gestured for us to sit. I took the chair opposite her. She didn't look at me. When the attorney closed the door, the room felt sealed. Contained. Like whatever happened next couldn't leak out until it was done. "Before we begin," the attorney said, calm and measured, "I need to explain a few things. This is a formal reading. Interruptions won't be helpful, and the will be executed exactly as written." Karen smiled tightly. "Of course." Her knee bounced under the table. The attorney opened the folder. "This will was finalized 8 months prior to Mr. Thompson's passing," he said. "It is valid, witnessed, and notarized." Karen's smile didn't falter. I felt my pulse in my ears. "We'll begin," he continued. The first few minutes were administrative. Names. Dates. Legal phrasing that sounded like another language if you weren't used to it. Then the words started to matter. "To my wife, Karen Thompson," the attorney read, "I leave my personal vehicle, my checking account ending in 427, and the right to reside in the marital home under the conditions specified in Article 3. Karen's head snapped up. "Conditions?" she repeated. The attorney held up a hand. "Please let me finish." Her jaw tightened. Article 3 took less than a minute to read. It might as well have been a verdict. "The marital home is to be placed into a family trust," the attorney said, eyes on the page. "The beneficiaries of said trust are my wife, Karen Thompson, and my son." Karen let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. "That's not," she started. The attorney didn't stop. "My wife is granted occupancy of the residence for the duration of her life, contingent upon the following conditions: the residence may not be sold, refinanced, or otherwise encumbered without the written consent of the co-beneficiary. The co-beneficiary may not be barred from accessing the property for purposes of retrieving personal effects or conducting trust-related business. Any attempt to evict, harass, or otherwise intimidate the co-beneficiary will constitute a violation of this clause and may result in forfeiture of occupancy rights." The clock ticked. Karen's face went pale. "This is ridiculous," she said, standing up. "He would never." "Please sit down," the attorney said firmly. She didn't. "This house is mine," she snapped, pointing at me. "He told me so." The attorney looked up at her for the first time, expression unchanged. "What Mr. Thompson told you informally is not legally relevant," he said. "Please sit." She dropped back into her chair, breathing hard. The attorney continued. "To my son," he read, "I leave all personal effects specifically listed in Appendix A." He turned a page. The watch. The mug rack. The fishing photo. My childhood trophies. Even the stupid ceramic dog my dad hated but kept because I made it in 5th grade. Karen made a sound in her throat that was half gasp, half growl. "This is theft," she said. "You're stealing from me." The attorney finally closed the folder. "That concludes the reading," he said, glancing at the clock. 7 minutes. Karen exploded. She slammed her hands on the table. "You planned this," she screamed at me. "You turned him against me." I didn't raise my voice. "I didn't plan anything," I said. "He did." "You manipulated him," she shouted. You show up after years of barely being around and think you deserve half my life. The attorney stood. Ms. Thompson, he said, voice hard now, if you continue, I will ask you to leave. She turned on him. This is fraud. I'll contest it. You're welcome to try, he replied calmly. But I suggest you read the forfeiture clause again before doing so. Silence. She looked at me, eyes blazing with something that finally looked like fear. You think this means you win? She hissed. I shook my head slowly. This isn't about winning, I said. It's about not being erased. Her lips trembled. Then she laughed, brittle and loud. You'll regret this, she said. You'll see. I gathered my jacket. I already did, I replied. Outside, the air felt colder. Cleaner. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, hands shaking, not from fear. From release. For the first time since my dad died, I knew exactly where I stood. And so did she. The consequences didn't come all at once. They came quietly. Procedurally. The way real power shifts usually do. 2 days after the will reading, the attorney emailed both of us a formal summary of the trust terms and next steps. It was written in clean, unemotional language that left no room for interpretation. Access rights. Inventory dates. Communication through counsel only. Karen replied within minutes. I didn't see the message. The attorney did. He forwarded me a single line with it. Please be advised that all future communication from Ms. Thompson will be directed through this office. That was the first boundary she couldn't bulldoze. When I went back to the house to retrieve my father's belongings, I didn't go alone. The attorney arranged a time. A neutral third party was present. Everything was documented. Karen stood in the living room, arms crossed, jaw tight, watching me collect the pieces of my father she tried to lock away. She didn't speak. Not once. The mug rack was still in a box in the garage. The fishing photo was face down in a drawer. The watch sat on the dresser, exactly where she'd snatched it from my hand days earlier. I packed slowly. Not to provoke her. Not to save her anything. But because each item carried weight. When I reached for the ceramic dog, I almost laughed. I remembered my dad rolling his eyes when I gave it to him, then putting it on his shelf anyway. Karen flinched when I wrapped it in paper. Petty, she muttered. I didn't respond. Because this wasn't about punishment. It was about reclaiming what was already mine. After that day, I didn't step foot in the house again. I didn't need to. The trust did its job without me having to argue for my existence. When Karen tried to change the locks, the locksmith refused. When she tried to cancel the homeowner's insurance, the trust administrator reversed it. When she attempted to list the house, just to see, the realtor backed out after reviewing the documents. Each move she made shrank her power a little more. And each time, it was documented. She sent messages anyway. Angry ones. Tearful ones. Accusatory ones. You've destroyed this family. He would be ashamed of you. You took advantage of him when he was weak. I never answered. Not once. Because the man she was invoking had already answered for me. Through ink. Through witnesses. Through 7 minutes of clarity he knew I'd need. Grief didn't vanish just because justice showed up. If anything, it got heavier. Without the chaos, there was room to feel everything I'd been holding back. The regret of not visiting more. The guilt of old arguments. The ache of knowing I'd never hear his voice again. Some nights, I sat alone in my car after work and cried until my chest hurt. Other nights, I felt oddly calm. Like I could finally breathe without waiting for someone to accuse me of taking up too much space. Family reactions split the way they always do. Some people stopped calling altogether. They chose comfort over truth. A few reached out quietly. I didn't know, one of my aunts said. About how she treated you. I thanked her. That was enough. Karen, eventually, stopped trying. Not because she understood. Because she had no leverage left. I went no contact fully after the attorney confirmed all arrangements were settled. I blocked her number. Filtered emails. Made it clear that any future attempts would be handled legally. No announcement. No dramatic goodbye. Just absence. The house remains what it always was. A building. What changed was the story attached to it. I wasn't a guest anymore. I wasn't a threat. I wasn't a shadow to be erased. I was a son whose father loved him enough to plan for the moment he wouldn't be there to protect him himself. And that realization stayed with me. Not as triumph. As closure. If someone tells you, "This is my house, you just live here," listen carefully. They're not talking about walls or deeds. They're talking about control. And the moment that control is taken away, the truth comes out fast and loud. The will reading didn't last long. But its echo did. And in that echo, I finally found something grief had taken from me for a while. My place. If someone tries to erase you the moment a loved one is gone, remember this. Control hates witnesses. Truth doesn't need permission. And silence, sometimes, is the strongest boundary you'll ever set.